All right, glad to know you're still watching Politics Now on LN 24/7. The conversation is moving forward this time around. We're taking a holistic perspective of what's going on in some key states in Nigeria. But we start our conversation with Isiaka Bosari, who is a political analyst. Thanks for being with us on the show. But let's give a background for our viewers, and then we'll come back to you to go straight into the conversation. Let's talk about Ogun State politics. The Speaker of the Ogun State House of Assembly, Olakunle Olumo, was impeached by 18 lawmakers out of 26-member assembly during plenary presided over by the Deputy Speaker, Mrs. Bonale Ajayi, and the assembly equally elected Mr. Oludesi Elemide, who is currently representing Odede State constituency at the assembly as the new speaker. The speaker was impeached due to gross misconduct, which borders on high-handedness, lack of focus and transparency, arrogance and poor leadership style, financial misappropriation, and inciting members against themselves. Now, on Monday, the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja nullified the 2024 appropriation bill that was presented by Governor Siminalayi Fubara. The court held that the budget was invalid as it was not properly presented before the Rivers State House of Assembly as required by the law, while recognizing Honorable Martin Anwule as the authentic speaker of the Rivers State Assembly. The court ordered Governor Fubara to represent the budget to the Legislative House for approval. Now, away from that, we're going to talk on, the peace pact that was presented by President Tinubu to Governor Wike and, of course, Governor Fubara. Now, let's look at the latest on that. Now, Rivers State High Court has struck out this particular suit challenging the legality of the presidential proclamation on resolving political crisis in the state. This was put forward by some elders in Rivers State. And, of course, they have vowed that they are going to continue to fight this out. But the question is, how long will it play? But let's go straight in the conversation. Isiaka, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for your time. Now, let's start with what is happening in Ogun State regarding the sacking of the Speaker of the State House of Assembly. What's your reaction to this?
All right, thank you very much. I'm good. I'm glad to be on this show this day. So one thing I have to say about this is, first, let's talk about the issue of Governor Abiodun. He himself is embattled. He has a pending court case in which he's looking forward to, and it's not even clear on where the outcome would be. So I think, in my opinion, even if a governor of such repute would be willing to fight such battle, it shouldn't be at this moment when something huge is still on his way. So he probably would have waited until after the entire case is settled at the Supreme Court, then he can fall back to local politicking. So if some of those lawmakers says Governor Biodun's involvement is not a part of the reason for the impeachment, I think I would also like to believe in what they said. And another factor is that this embattled speaker himself is someone whose character had always been in question. Let's remember, he still has a pending court case with the EFCC with regard to embezzlement of almost 3 billion naira or 2.5 billion. So for someone like that, no, is it 2.5? Yes, 2.5 billion naira. So for someone like that, his character, his personality has always been in question. So when this issue also came into play, so to me, it was more of a validation of what he had always been known to be. And even as at then, when the EFCC arraigned him in court, it was clear, and they stated clearly that he embezzled from the coffers of the State Assembly, which is the same reason why he's being prosecuted now again by the members of the. So everything seems clear. It is just justice trying to visit him. And one would think for someone with a pending court case with regard to embezzlement, that the man would try to tread softly, but it is just disappointing that he is what he is. Time changes, situation changes, but his personality still remains the same. So that's just my opinion about it.
Now, we've been seeing a rise of crisis in state assemblies across the nation. Can you help us understand some of the underlying factors that's driving this?
With regard to Rivers and Plateau and Ogun State, I would say that the crisis these three experience look the same with regard to the fact that it borders around the State House of Assemblies, but the context within which these crises are taking place are quite different. For example, in Ogun State, if probably the speaker had not embezzled and even cornered some of the funds that were even meant for the welfare of the members, he probably won't have had problem with his members. So in Ogun State, the speaker was the architect of his own misfortune. Can we say that of what is happening in Plateau State? No, they are quite different. In Plateau State, for example, now, the Court of Appeal sacked 16 members on grounds that the party structure is faulty. So I begin to ask, what exactly is the structure? And the members are saying, fine, if the Court of Appeal says the party structure is faulty and that is why they are sacking us, how come they uphold the election of the governor? That by the Supreme Court upholding the election of the governor, then it automatically translates to upholding the election that equally brought them in, since they both belong to members of the same party. I think the logic behind that is quite clear. And when the Supreme Court is stating a ruling which contravenes what had earlier been said by lower courts, I think that of the Supreme Court should take precedence, which automatically, by the same logic, if the Supreme Court is affirming the election that brought the governor Mustang in, why the appeal court says the election of the State House of Assembly members should be nullified, then I think that is a conflict of law that needs to be settled. So in Ogun State, the speaker was the architect of the fortune or of the misfortune that is taking place there. But in the case of Plateau State, it is a matter of a faulty legal system where contradictory judgments are being passed on matters that borders on the same issue. So let's now leave that aside and now go to River State. River State is actually the most intriguing out of all this. The reason is because it is a factor between a godfather and his godson. And I do say it with all sincerity. Fubara was the architect of his misfortune as well. Because even from a distance, anyone would know the kind of person Nyesom Wike is. Even from the way he addresses the traditional rulers in the state and with his behavior and stuff, you would have known that Nyesom Wike is the one way kind of man. It is either his way or the highway. So in that situation, if you know you are getting into an agreement with him, you better make it clear for your own good. And when Nyesom Wike came in and said, wow, I will be appointing this, and that, even if Fubara would have tried to go against it, he should have done that in a more reasonable way, or he should have been more diplomatic about it. I am not trying to justify the actions of Nyesom Wike. And there is one factor we equally need to talk about. It has to do with the defection of those members of the State House of Assembly. They defected to the opposition party, and there were calls that they should forfeit their seats. Yes, based on law, they should forfeit the seats. And the reason for this was because the position of the law is that a member should cease to hold on to the position in which he is elected upon defection into another party, except two conditions are met. What is the first condition? If the party from which they are defecting is defunct, like it was in the case of ACN when the APC coalition was formed, then in such way, the members can hold on to their respective position. And the second is if there is a recognized faction within the party and they happen to belong to a faction within the party that now decides to move into another different party. So in that situation, they can still hold on to their mandate. And what evidence people do project to hold on to this is what the judicial president has already done. Judicial president of Star Decisis Enoch Move that let's stand by previous decision and not to disturb the settled case of law. So in the case of in 2015, we witnessed something similar in the PDP as well, when the likes of Bukola Saraki decided to defect to the then coalition, newly formed coalition of All Progressive Congress. But as I said earlier, the context is quite different in the sense that before the defection, then the likes of Bukola Saraki knew so well that if they were to move without proper faction creation within the party, they would forfeit the seat to which they were elected. So what was the first thing they did? They created the new PDP. So by that, there was already a recognized faction within the party. Then when they moved, everyone knew that these people that are moving are members of the new PDP that are moving into another party. But in the case of this, all we have were the G5, no recognized faction within the party. It was just those 5 governors and their supporters, and even these governors still remain within the party. But some of the loyalists said they want to move into an opposition party. Automatically, they forfeit being members of that party or of that parliament. So by virtue of that, Mr. Fubara, knowing fully well the position of the law, presented the budget to the 4-man panel that are loyal to him within the House. He has equally acted within the ambit of the law. Verily, 4 people cannot make the quorum or cannot make the quorum to form the House. But on the other hand, the other members have acted in a way that already made them invalid.
What are your thoughts generally on President Tinubu's peace pact and the fact that it is being challenged, in court?
Budget shouldn't be represented, are equally trying to project and protect an interest from their own side as well. These are a group of elders in the state that says no, this thing must stand as it is. Of course, everyone knows that Nyesom Wike had already stepped on toes even while he was governor of the state, and some people were already looking for an opportunity to break his rank. So Fubara only presented himself as an opportunity for some of them to queue behind and say no to the dictates of Nyesom Wike. President Tinubu weighing in is actually, in my opinion, a matter of a statesman and a man trying to seek a political solution, which could have been the best in the interest of the state, the people, and everyone involved. Because in the absence of President Tinubu's intervention, the state is likely to degenerate into a state of crisis. And for a place like Rivers State, everyone knows what they are capable of doing when crisis like that breaks up. So as I was saying earlier, it is all a matter of interest. And that was why I said something about the defection of those members of the party. If the law is to be followed in the strict sense of it, those people should forfeit the seat to which they all belong by virtue of their defection, not because to defect is wrong under the law, but because the conditions that warrants them to defect and still maintain the seat to which they belong does not exist. And that is the position of that group that says no, that Mr. Fubara should not represent the budget because based on the law and the conditions that warrant him to present the budget, then that those 4-man team to which he presented the budget are recognized by the law as the substantive honorable members of the Rivers State House of Assembly as at that time. So I think that is the condition. So all Mr. Tinubu did was to seek a political solution, which some of those people are trying to go against. And if we have to go about the court making a judgment today and changing it tomorrow, this is not the first time the court is doing that. The court, the confidence even politicians repose in the court has long been lost. We should get that clear. And every politician tend to use the court to their own very ends. And that is why we see the abuse of courts going here and there, and why no one seems to honor any ruling from the court anymore.
Earlier, you talked about interest. What about the people's interest? We have the path that he should go in terms of the way that suits former Governor Wike, and of course, the path that suits his own, style with which he wants to govern the people, even though it may not be what the people want from him. How does Governor Fubara navigate these pathways that's set before him?
With regard to interest, actually, I've always said and we always say, to politicians, the interest of the people do not really matter. What matters to them is their personal interest and the interest of their praise singers, which they call followers. I am a member of a political party, which I wouldn't declare here, but trust me, I'm a member of a party which ordinarily should be supporting the action of Nyesom Wike in Rivers State. But in a situation whereby a man is trying to pilot the affairs of the state from outside and trying to obstruct the free flow of governance from the governor that was elected in the state by the people's mandate, then I think that should not be supported no matter what the situation is. And when we talk about Fubara, Fubara only sees an opportunity to break himself loose from the apron end of Nyesom Wike and is clinging onto that opportunity. So I think everyone is just clinging onto the opportunity to which they see, and the public sentiment seems to be favoring Fubara as at this period. Not because he is fighting the interest of the people per se, but because the people are against the dictatorship of Nyesom Wike and just want a fresh of breath air. That is, in my opinion, what is taking place right now.
Regarding the issue of representation of the budget, what do you envisage Governor Fubara doing? Is he going to sue for peace by representing the budget? Because this is one of the talking points in that peace deal that was earlier, presented to both of them by President Bola Tinubu.
With the political strength of President Tinubu, with the influence he has to wage into the matter, and from the little experience I have with conflict resolution as well, I see a representation of the budget as the most possible path to a lasting peace, at least for Mr. Fubara to finish his tenure.
Now, Isiaka, there are some persons who are of the thought that the president is using the Supreme Court judgment that is still in awaiting regarding the governorship election in Rivers State, that he is using it as a form of deal, or how would I call it now, as a pin down, on Governor Fubara. What do you say to those making those assertions?
On matters of legal concern, especially when it has to do with the Supreme Court, these are a group of jurists who are not just anybody picked from anywhere, highly experienced legal luminaries that sat on a matter, looked at the situation surrounding it, and said, this is the way they are going. If the Supreme Court is making a ruling at any point in time, as a Democrat that I am, I would be on the position that the Supreme Court would not be wrong. At least I will side myself, or I will put myself in the position or on the school of thought of the positivist school of thought that says that law is what the court says it is. So if the Supreme Court makes a ruling, I wouldn't be in the best position to say they are wrong. So whether there is an external influence that determines the cause of their decision or not should not be in context in a matter that concerns the Supreme Court. We can talk about that when it has to do with state high courts or maybe courts of lower jurisdiction. But the Supreme Court, I think the experience that brings about the people that sat on the cases and the judgments delivered must have gone through a deep sense of reasoning and professionalism. So it shouldn't be ridiculed on the basis of sentiments or so. That is just in my opinion. I will stand with the Supreme Court.
I'm still going to stay on this question, Isiaka, because you would want to think that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu himself indicted himself by involving himself in this crisis and by presenting a deal. Now, let me break it down. If you are presenting a deal before somebody and you're giving the person a choice, you either make this choice or you face the consequences. You either make this other choice or you face the consequences. The simple question here is, did President Bola Ahmed Tinubu indict himself by giving this deal, so to speak? And is this a yardstick for people to believe that he could be using the awaiting Supreme Court judgment in the Rivers governorship election case as a form of weapon to use against Fubara if he does not dance to the tune that favors former governor of the state, Wike?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mana. I think what happened in that case is when Socrates was trying to talk about his own definitions of justice, he said justice is what serves the interest of the powerful people. So in this case, let's just presume that was the interpretation of justice by the Supreme Court. Not necessarily did the president probably call any of the judges to say, no, let the judgment go in this direction. But the president has a plan. He presented a plan. Automatically, the opinion of the president or where it seems to be on the matter is not in context anymore. Everyone already know where the president's interest lie in this matter. So the Supreme Court now delivering a judgment in favor of that part should not be should not be should not be should not be associated wholly with the influence of the president. The president's influence or interest must have played a part, but are we so sure? How sure are we that the president played the part, or how sure are we that, because I'm not a normative person, I don't like to speak about what ought to be. I like to speak about what it is. What it is, did the president have any direct influence? No. If the influence is indirect, based on the fact that the judges know where his interest lies and they decided to try the part that favors his interest, I would not consider that as a direct impact. Although, as I said earlier, what favors the interest of the powerful must have been the rationale behind the justice that was served by the Supreme Court when we put the justice in court. So,
Thank you so much, Isiaka. But before we go, one final question. What do you envisage will be the resolution regarding the assembly crisis in Plateau State?
let me first say that we are in a country where anything can happen, where anything goes. If Elewe Omo could preside over over the State House of Assembly in Oyo State a couple of years back to remove a sitting governor in this same Nigeria, so I know anything can actually happen. And that is the reason why I wouldn't say 100% that the lawmakers would be reinstated. But if the law is to be followed as it should be, then by the reasoning of the law, they should be reinstated. Because one, if we are talking about structures, that the lack of structure is the reason why they are being removed, then in such a case, even INEC itself should be a defendant. If the structure is not worthy enough to make anyone contest and win, then how come INEC conducted that election and still made them appear on the ballot? So, and the issue of structure itself is contextual or even conceptual in nature. What does the court mean by the structure upon which it acted to remove these people? It was purely politics, and it is only the powerful people trying to wield the big stick to punish those with lesser authority. So at the end of the day, for the Supreme Court to have favored the election of Mr. Muftwang, so I see the Supreme Court at the end of the day also reinstating these 16 lawmakers that were sacked, because obviously the conditions upon which they were sacked is unclear, dubious, and not cannot be proven beyond reasonable doubt. So it is very, very, very contextual. So it is not clear. So I see them being reinstated unless rule of law did not take its course.
Thank you so much for your thoughts, Isiaka. And that's the much we can take on politics now tonight. Once again, my name is Mono Balagugu. Many thanks for watching. And do remember to visit our website, www.ln247.news, for more news updates, and follow us across our social media handles. And also, you can also follow me on my own social media handles displaying on your screen. Thank you so much for watching, and have a pleasant day.